Both the House and the Senate have similar tax cut bills this session. Legislative leaders discussed the bills during the taping of this week's Oklahoma Forum program, which will be seen Sunday at 12:30. Senate President Pro Tem Brian Bingman says there will be a tax cut bill passed this year.
What we're trying to do basically is to fix what happened through the court last year when that was thrown out. So taking the tax rate whenever the revenues get back to, in the Senate bill, is when the revenues get back to what was certified for last year. I think the House is a little different, and then we've got a second trigger on there. So it's just a matter of all of us getting together and trying to work out. We're not far away on that.
So where will the reduction wind up being?
Well, I think
down to 5?
I'm sure you'll see the 5 1/4 down to 5 whenever revenues hit a certain mark. The Senate version, of course, had it going to 4.85, and I think the House version hits the corporate tax, taking it from 6 to 5. So there's going to be some compromise there.
Excuse me. In previous years, the state has cut taxes when there's been growth revenue. There isn't growth revenue right now. There are a lot of needs. There's a $188 million revenue shortfall. So why is there a push for tax cuts now? I know there's a trigger for a tax cut in the future. Is that the way to handle that?
In my opinion, there is no push for tax cuts. From my constituents, there's no push for tax cuts. I mean, the bill we passed out of the Senate, the same year we're $180 million down. We had teachers, 25,000, 30 teachers marching on the Capitol lawn. We're talking about further cutting our revenue. The bill we passed in the Senate doesn't even take effect until January 1, 2016. The legislators are going to be meeting next spring without me. They can take a look at that then. In my opinion, we have a tax cut bill this year because they want to have a tax cut bill and a tax cut vote. So I'm hoping there's no compromise. I'm hoping that there's no tax cut. We're at revenue failure. We have needs across the state that we talked about earlier today. So why dig a hole deeper?
Well, and I want to make clear here, it's not going to, historically, as we've lowered the taxes since 2003, I believe it was, the revenue's increased. The rate's gone down by 25%, but the revenue generated from that same stream of funding has gone up 26%. So you've actually seen an increase in the revenue. The reason you can't do it this year is because the tax commission will certify how much money you're going to lose from the tax cut in theory, but in practice, the revenue is going up. And so you'd have to take into account what they score the tax cut as being and take that out of the certified number that we have to spend. That's the challenge and the basic reason I think we're not actually instituting the tax cut this year, but the revenue's increased since we've taken it down from 7% to 5 1/4. And talking with the tax commission, they said we've collected far more revenue at 5 1/4 than we ever did at 7%.
Well, that's just because you've got more people in the state. I mean, that's just naturally what's going to happen. But when you look at the pure facts, we're $500 million below where we were in 2008 when adjusted for inflation. $500 million down. And yet, Common Education has been cut by $230 million. You've got 7,000 people waiting on the disabilities or the DDSD waiting list, just trying to get services. You've got corrections at such a state that you've got, but they're about 40% understaffed. People we're on the verge of a riot anywhere that could cost people lives. I mean, we've got real significant problems. And then to turn around and say, well, let's go ahead and cut taxes by $200 million like the House did just a few weeks ago and like the Senate did in committee just the other day. To do that, to me, is just fiscally irresponsible. There is no push. I promise you. I live in South Oklahoma City, represent Del City and South Oklahoma City. Not one constituent has contacted me in the 8 years I've been at the Capitol and says, please cut the income tax. Not one. And I know most members have not heard that. This really is I want to run in a very conservative Republican state, make sure Tea Party primary opponents can't go say they never cut taxes. It really is more of a pro forma vote as opposed to the actual benefits, because if you're going to argue that a tax cut's going to generate money back in, a tax cut that gives $29 back to the average Oklahoman is not significant enough to generate enough economic activity.